"Your son is fine, we're at the casino," my mom said as I delivered my daughter. I panicked. Days later, I found him eating pig feed in a shed. I was going through my work emails while sipping my coffee this morning. I was employed as the head accountant at a modest accounting company situated in Cleveland, Ohio. The sunlight from the window was shining on my face, which looked a bit worn. The walls were decorated with photos of my son, Michael, who was 8 years old. "Michael, wake up, you'll be tardy for school," I called out into the hallway, but there was no answer. Oh, that's right, Michael was staying at my parents' place currently. I gently touched my big belly and pondered the baby I was expecting soon. The estimated delivery date was just 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks back, I had experienced indications of premature labor, and my physician had told me to stay in bed completely. It was pretty hard to rest when I was the only one caring for my 8-year-old son. My former husband, Thomas, had moved to a different state after we split up 3 years prior, and I couldn't realistically ask him for daily assistance. "Mom, I truly appreciate you looking after Michael for a bit," I told my mom, Judith, on the phone, expressing my thanks. My parents resided in the Cleveland suburbs and were always happy to look after their grandson, Michael. However, I had begun to notice slight differences in how my parents were acting lately. My mother, specifically, seemed less affectionate than usual and seemed hurried, as if she was hurrying about. "Don't concern yourself, just concentrate on the baby. Leave Michael to our care." I could tell Judith sounded upbeat, yet I was worried hearing those slot machines in the background. "Mom, are you at the casino again?" I asked. "It's just fun, try not to fret," she replied. "Your dad and I go every week," she added. "It's a way to de-stress." I was apprehensive, but I had to put my faith in my folks. Growing up, my parents, particularly my dad, Lawrence, were always so careful and dependable. He spent 4 decades working at a bank and lived a very stable life. Even after he retired, he remained active by volunteering within the community. My mother, Judith, a former elementary school teacher, was a very affectionate and thoughtful person. The fact that they were visiting the casino more than just their usual weekly trip could have been brought on by Dad losing his job last year. Nevertheless, I was confident that they'd look after Michael. The day my labor began earlier than expected, I quickly dialed 911 for an ambulance. Once I got to the hospital, I called my parents. "Mom, I'm in labor," I told her. "I just got here." "Oh my," she responded, "and it's still 3 weeks early. Are you okay?" The doctor said they were going to perform an emergency C-section immediately. "Tell Michael that Mommy will be with the baby soon," I said. "I understand, don't worry," she said. "We'll take care of Michael." That evening, I delivered a baby girl. I named her Emma. Sadly, I had some issues after the delivery, and had to remain at the hospital longer than expected. I wonder if I could speak with Michael. Melissa would phone from her hospital room every day. She actually got to have a few brief chats with Michael during those initial few days. It really uplifted her spirits to hear her son's voice, and it helped with her getting better. "Mommy, I played guitar with Grandpa, and Grandma's cookies were really good." Michael seemed perfectly normal. But after around a week had passed, it became harder to get in contact with her folks. They started missing more and more of her calls, and even when they did pick up, there was always loud casino music blaring in the background. "Mom, where's Michael?" "He's busy playing with his friends at the moment, dear. I'll make sure he calls you back when he gets home." But sadly, those follow-up calls often never happened. My anxiety grew worse with each passing day. Finally, on the 10th day, the doctor gave her the okay to leave the hospital. Carrying little Emma in her arms, Melissa walked out of the hospital room, escorted by the nurse. I tried calling my parents several times, but no one responded. "Michael," I felt my chest tighten with worry. I hailed a taxi and decided to go straight to my house. Maybe my parents had taken Michael there and were waiting for me. I hoped that was the case as I cuddled my new baby girl. I got out of the taxi, and clutching Emma close, I walked toward the front door of my house. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I realized instantly that I was alone. A heavy silence filled the air, and my anxiety rushed through my chest. "Michael? Mom? Dad?" my voice just echoed in the empty house. I glanced around the living room in a hurry, but it was clear Michael hadn't been staying there. I immediately grabbed my phone and redialed my parents' number. The phone kept ringing, but nobody picked up. What in the world is happening here? With my heart racing, I got back in the taxi, clutching the baby, and instructed the driver to take me to my parents' place. 20 minutes later, I was standing outside Lawrence and Judith's house. I'm at my parents' home now, but everything feels off. I pushed the doorbell repeatedly, while keeping the baby secure in one arm, yet no one answered. The mailbox was overflowing with flyers, and the newspaper was still there, uncollected. My face creased in a frown as I examined the mailbox on the porch. My dad usually made it a point to retrieve the newspaper every single morning. I circled the house and attempted to peer inside through the windows, but the curtains were closed, making it hard for me to see anything. I became even more worried and determined to go into the backyard. The garden, which had always been immaculate, was now covered in weeds. The bushes that my father had always been so proud of looked like they were dying, maybe from a lack of water. It was evident that nobody had been taking care of the place for a while. I rapped on the back door and called out, "Dad, Mom, Michael, is anyone home?" I asked, but didn't receive a response. It felt chilly, and I pulled the baby closer. Emma looked up at me with curious eyes. The front door was secured, and it appeared the house was empty. My nervousness began to morph into actual terror. Then out of the blue I heard a little sound coming from the backyard. I cautiously went toward the source of the noise. At the far end of the yard stood a weathered wooden shed. As I focused on the shed, a flood of memories washed over me. Isn't that the shed where my dad used to keep his pig? When I was a young woman, my father had a miniature Vietnamese pot-bellied pig as a pet. The pig had passed away a few years prior, and the shed hadn't really been used much since. I walked up to the shed and shouted, "Is anyone there, Michael?" A quiet weeping sound emerged from inside the shed. My heart skipped a beat. I clutched the baby close with one arm and sprinted toward the shed. The door, which was rusted, was ajar. I forced it open and peered inside. In the shadowy space, I spotted my son. Michael was slumped on the grimy floor, clutching pig feet and shaking. His clothing was filthy, his hair was messy, and tear tracks were obvious on his face. When he noticed me, his eyes widened in surprise. "Michael, what are you doing?" When he saw me, Michael's face registered shock, and tears instantly filled his eyes. "Mommy," he whispered, "I'm hungry. Grandpa and Grandma haven't been back for days." There wasn't anything to eat in the fridge. I ran to my shaking son and embraced him tightly. The boy's tiny body felt chilled and tremulous. "How long have you been here?" "Where did Grandpa and Grandma go?" Michael, I recall, was crying when he replied. It was 3 days prior. Grandma had said, "We're going out for a little while," but they never returned. They won't respond when I call them. I was really frightened. Melissa was completely stunned by what her son told her. 3 whole days had passed. My 8-year-old son had been by himself for 72 hours. "You've been here by yourself. And what about something to eat?" There was some food in the fridge initially, but it was all gone. I was so starving that I found some pig feed and ate it. Melissa gazed intently at her son's features. Michael's face looked gaunt, and he had dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he was undernourished and scared. A furious feeling surged up inside of me. What on earth were my parents even considering? I cradled my newborn infant in one arm and hugged my son with the other. "Everything's all right now, Michael. Mommy's here." Fuming, I grabbed Michael's hand and started towards my folks' home. I told my boy to wait in the backyard, and then I pried a window open and got inside. The interior of the residence was in a much worse condition than I'd even anticipated. Trash, empty alcohol bottles, plus a bunch of lottery tickets and casino receipts were strewn everywhere. It was beyond comprehension that this was my usually neat parents' home. I tried calling my parents on their cell phones several times, my hands shaking. On the 5th try, my mom eventually answered the phone. "Hello," Judith sounded upbeat, and I could hear the sounds of a casino in the background. "Melissa, I'm occupied now, let's talk later." My anger just erupted. I discovered Michael eating pig feed in the pig pen. "Okay, so what's happening here?" Judith's reply after a short pause was, "You're overreacting. The fridge should have contained some groceries. Just leave me alone, okay? I'm in a good groove right now. The refrigerator is completely bare. Michael has been unsupervised for quite some time." Melissa's voice shook a little. "It wasn't really that long, maybe a day or 2 tops. Oh, my dealer's calling me. I'll give you a call back later." When the call concluded, Melissa didn't know what to say. She was shaking with pure rage. All the values she had learned as a child, a sense of duty, family love, and faith in people, felt like they were all falling apart. She quickly brought Michael back to her own place. As soon as they were inside, she gave him a nice warm bath and put him in clean clothes. She got some food from the fridge and put together a quick dinner. Michael ate with such hunger as though he hadn't had a decent meal in ages. After the meal, Melissa checked over my son's body. Thankfully, there weren't any serious injuries, but there were signs of minor dehydration and that he hadn't been eating well. "It's all right now, Michael," I told him. "Mommy's here with you. And here's Emma, your new sister. I'm never letting you go through anything like that again," I vowed. Michael snuggled close to me, finally feeling safe enough to start crying. Holding my son close, I rubbed his little back, and I made a promise in my heart. I'm going to fight to keep these kids safe, no matter what. I don't know what's happened to my parents, but right now, Michael and Emma's safety is all that matters. That evening, after the kids were out cold, I sat on the couch in the living room, burying my face in my hands. My parents, who I had always looked up to, loved with all my heart and put my faith in, why would they do such a thing? I knew I'd have to find some answers tomorrow, but tonight I was just wiped out. After making sure the kids were still breathing, I finally let my weary body relax. The sun was shining through a tiny crack in the curtains, and it lit up my face. I awoke from my slumber, desperately hoping for a second that everything from yesterday had been a bad dream. But then I heard Emma's little cries coming from the next room, and Michael was asleep on the sofa, and I was brought back to the real world. I slowly got out of bed and went to Emma's room. I picked up the baby and fed her, and I started to figure out what I needed to do today. My initial tasks would be to get in touch with Child Protective Services and also talk to a lawyer. While I made breakfast, I gently woke Michael. "Good morning, Michael," I said. "Did you sleep okay?" Michael sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Yeah, it's been a while since I slept at Mom's house." I smoothed my son's hair and put some pancakes on a plate. "Let's just take it easy today," I told him. "You can go to school if you want, or you can stay home and relax." "I want to stay home," Michael whispered. "Will Grandpa and Grandma come back?" I replied, carefully choosing my words, "I don't know right now. But don't worry, Mommy will always be with you." After we ate, I phoned Child Protective Services. I described the whole situation, sharing how Michael had been left in a pig pen. On the other end of the phone, a woman's voice spoke softly. She stated that it seemed like a serious situation and that a caseworker would come today. She also inquired about my child's current state. I had given him first aid last night. He seemed to have mild dehydration and malnutrition, but thankfully I didn't think his health was seriously damaged. About 2 hours later, Carol Johnson, a caseworker from Child Protective Services, arrived at my home. She appeared to be in her 50s with a welcoming smile and observant eyes. After chatting with Melissa, she also spoke kindly to Michael. We continued talking in my kitchen. She declared that this was definitely a child abandonment case. She inquired about Michael's health again. I told her as I held Emma that a pediatrician had examined him. He does have dehydration and some malnutrition, but nothing too severe. I'm more worried about the emotional trauma. Carol replied, scribbling notes that given his state, it would probably be beneficial to get him into therapy with a specialist. "Have you managed to get in touch with your parents?" I told her I'd talked with them briefly at a casino yesterday, but they hadn't answered their phones since. Carol replied with a serious look that we needed to consider contacting the police about this. She also advised me to seek a temporary protection order. She emphasized the safety of my children needs to be the most important thing. I nodded. Protecting Michael and Emma's well-being was paramount, even though I cared deeply for my own parents. I can relate to that. I need you to outline the required steps for me. Once Carol was gone, I immediately reached out to my lawyer, Sarah Miller. Sarah was someone I could depend on. She had guided me through my divorce previously. I described the situation and asked about getting a temporary restraining order to keep my parents away. "Melissa, this is a very difficult scenario," Sarah stated. "If they left the children, it could lead to a criminal investigation." Sarah's tone communicated how critical this situation was, even over the telephone. "Also, it's something to think about if my parents are in financial difficulty. They are spending money at casinos. I'm concerned if Michael's investments are being affected." I let out a surprised breath. "What are you suggesting? My folks were in charge of Michael's trust fund, weren't they?" "That's correct. It's a college fund worth $50,000, combining money from my ex-husband's child support with the savings I set aside. I figured my parents were more financially responsible than I was." Sarah took a deep breath, audible on the phone. "We need to check on the status of those funds. I'll look into things from my side." Sarah called a couple of days later. Her tone was grave and serious. "I have some bad news." The entire sum of Michael's trust fund was taken out 6 months prior. "It was signed off on by your parents." I slumped down in a chair. "All $50,000 was gone? Why? On top of that, 3 credit cards have been opened using your parents' names, with debts amounting to $150,000. Some of that is from casino cash advances." I couldn't even speak. It's hard to accept, but my parents, who always preached financial prudence, completely broke my confidence in them by depleting the money intended for my grandson. I just can't wrap my head around it. They were always giving me lessons on how to handle money. Sarah whispered softly, "Those behaviors are classic signs of a gambling problem, Melissa. Your parents are not well. Nevertheless, what they did is inexcusable." Following this, I found out Lawrence and Judith had become addicted to gambling the last couple of years, amassing serious debt. They also blew through Lawrence's retirement savings. Their home was already facing foreclosure. I felt bewildered and wounded. Deep down, I was battling both fury and worry for my mom and dad, but most of all, protecting Michael was paramount. I set up therapy appointments for my son and told his school what was going on. That evening, I was cooking dinner. Michael was studying while Emma was asleep in her crib. Suddenly, the doorbell sounded. Peeking through the little window, I saw my parents looking ashen and completely worn out. I paused for a beat before unlocking the door. Lawrence wouldn't look at me and just stared at the ground. "Melissa, please let us talk." "Talk about what? Leaving your grandson to suffer or swiping $50,000? My voice was icy. Judith sobbed, We need some help." Even though I was shaking with rage, I allowed them inside. I was staying with a friend when Judith, sitting across from me in the living room, started crying uncontrollably. The gambling had gotten out of hand, and we were being pursued by debt collectors, plus we were about to lose our home. Lawrence covered his face with his hands, his body trembling. I feel terrible about Michael. We only planned a short visit to the casino. But once we sat down, we couldn't stop, and we completely lost track of time. And when we lost, we doubled down, hopping to recoup our losses. Judith managed to get the words out. I did leave some food for Michael. But to be gone for 3 days, I can't believe what I did. Melissa was hearing her parents' admission, and she felt torn between being bewildered and furious. She stood up and spoke in a shaky voice. I am absolutely shocked. You're my parents. How could you do this? Lawrence said, avoiding eye contact. It began after I got laid off. I went to the casino with my retirement funds, and I actually won at first. I couldn't get the adrenaline rush out of my mind, and when we started losing, we tried to recoup our losses. Judith continued, her voice trembling. Melissa was shaking with rage. What about Michael's education fund? Her parents didn't respond. Lawrence said in a soft voice, we used all of it. We were going to earn it back. Melissa, in a fit of anger, ordered her parents to leave the room. Leave immediately. Do you have any idea how frightened Michael was? He's only 8 years old. You left your own grandchild without any food, and you're telling me it wasn't intentional. Lawrence reached out with a trembling hand. Melissa, please. I want to have a conversation with you. Seriously, where have you been hiding? While I was stuck in the hospital, you essentially deserted your grandson to go gamble. You're not my parents anymore, and I don't want you anywhere near us. Judith dissolved into tears, and Lawrence departed with a defeated posture. Following that, Melissa talked to her lawyer, and she filed for a temporary restraining order against her parents. Simultaneously, the Child Protective Services worker informed her that this was a grave instance of child abandonment and that criminal charges might be considered. Some weeks later, just before the court's decision arrived, Lawrence appeared at Melissa's job. He seemed even skinnier, and exhaustion was evident on his face. Daughter, please, he pleaded. We were completely in the wrong. Judith and I have actually been attending a program for gambling addiction since the previous week. We are aware that we don't deserve to see either you or Michael, but, he extended a letter, his hands trembling. It was an apology letter from Judith and a document proving their treatment participation from a local addiction specialist. Melissa took the letter, though her face stayed firm. Even though she was battling a mix of feelings, she wouldn't grant them forgiveness right away. Honestly, getting treatment is the absolute minimum you should do. But honestly, I've learned that trust, once broken, is not so easily fixed. The hurt that Michael and I have suffered will take a very long time to heal. Lawrence, as he was walking away, just nodded and said, I understand. We're prepared to demonstrate our commitment over time. We can't bear the thought of losing you. I knew that legal action would be paused for a time, but I believed that mending things with my folks would take ages. Clutching Judith's letter against me, I stared out the window. When I got home, Michael had just gotten back from school. He was slowly getting his strength back, but he still sometimes woke up scared from bad dreams. Did you have a good day at school, Mom? I gave my son a smile. Michael paused to consider it before saying, yeah, but everyone was asking me about Grandpa and Grandma. I sat down beside my son and put my arm around him. What did you tell them? I said Grandpa and Grandma are sick and I can't see them for a bit, Michael replied with a serious look on his face. I gently rubbed my son's head. That's right, Grandpa and Grandma are getting help right now. Will I get to see them again? There was a glimmer of optimism in Michael's eyes. I let out a long breath. Definitely someday. But for now, let's focus on doing our best, just us three, with Mommy and your sister. That evening, after Michael had gone to sleep, I unfolded Judith's letter. Within it, my mother had penned words filled with sorrow and contrition in shaky handwriting. My father, your grandfather, battled the very same ailment. He passed away, leaving the family in massive debt. I had promised myself not to repeat those mistakes, but here I am taking the same road. I desire to put an end to this sickness that runs through our family for good. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. It was a confusing swirl of feelings. I felt a mixture of emotions, rage and sorrow mixed with a flicker of optimism. Half a year had gone by. The sun was shining brightly through the window, and I sat on the couch, looking over the papers in my hands. It was the most recent update from the counselor helping my parents. Over these past 6 months, I had gained a lot of understanding regarding their gambling problem, and I had also started attending a local support group for families affected by it. Michael was in therapy and was slowly getting better after his experience. Emma was developing well and could already flip over. Recently, she had even started sitting up. As I was focused on the report, my phone rang. It was Betty, the support group leader. Melissa, are you going to make it to the meeting today? Betty's friendly voice came over the line. Yes, I'll be there. After Michael's school, I answered, making a note on my schedule. Everyone is so encouraged by your parents' journey, especially after seeing the recent report that shows progress. I glanced out the window and took a deep breath. They really seem to be trying, yes. But addiction is a disease, Melissa, Betty said gently. Your parents made mistakes, absolutely, but they're also struggling. I know, but it's tough to forgive them, particularly when I see Michael still waking up from nightmares. Forgiveness isn't the same as excusing what they did. It's about releasing yourself, Betty said softly, for your well-being and for Michael's. After ending the call, I was lost in thought. My folks really were putting in the effort to reform themselves. They'd established a system for paying off their debts, downsized to a smaller place, and were genuinely dedicated to their therapy. My dad had taken on a part-time gig at the neighborhood grocery store, and my mom had started volunteering at a support group for people struggling with addiction. Around this time, I got a phone call from Michael's teacher. Michael had been upset at school, saying he missed his grandparents. The teacher told me he'd drawn a picture of his family during class. His grandparents were included, and it sounded like he wanted to see them. That evening, I spoke with Michael. Do you want to see Grandpa and Grandma? I asked in a soft voice. Michael confirmed it with a nod. Yes, I was nervous, but I wondered if Grandpa and Grandma had forgotten all about me. I embraced my son in a hug. They haven't forgotten you. They were just mixed up because of their sickness. It appears that they are improving now. After talking things over with the counselor, I determined that I'd permit a short, chaperoned visit. This meeting was set to occur at the counselor's office, a safe and unbiased setting. When the day of the visit came, Michael was apprehensive but excited to be seeing his grandparents. Lawrence and Judith had successfully finished a 6-month program to address their gambling addiction, and they were consistently attending support sessions. Upon arriving at the counselor's office, I had a quick chat with my parents. Melissa, thank you for giving us this chance to see Michael. Tears welled up in Judith's eyes. This is what Michael desired, and I'm simply honoring his wishes, Melissa said quietly. For half a year, we've been attending therapy sessions daily. We're gradually chipping away at what we owe, Lawrence mumbled, avoiding eye contact. I'd rather not dwell on yesterday's events today. I was there exclusively for Michael. It was so moving to see Michael with his grandparents. Judith immediately started crying when she saw her grandson, and Michael embraced them, though he was initially unsure. They had a quiet conversation about Michael's school activities and how Emma was growing up. As I observed the meeting, a jumble of feelings welled up inside me. My fury over being unable to excuse my parents' mistakes battled with a longing to mend our broken family ties. After the counseling appointment, I opened a family photo album back home. It was filled with pictures from when things were better. One picture instantly grabbed my attention. It showed me at 12, on a boat on a lake with my mom and dad. The words from Judith's letter echoed in my head. My father, your grandfather, had the same condition. For the first time, I started seeing my parents' choices differently. Even if I couldn't completely forgive their behavior, maybe I could get a better grasp of gambling addiction as a sickness and how it affects everyone. Some time later, I made the decision to ask my parents to join me at a family therapy session. I wanted to make this a secure environment where we, the three of us, could share our emotions and mend our past hurts. On that particular day, when I discovered Michael in the pig pen, something inside me shattered. I couldn't believe in either of you as my parents anymore, Melissa quietly admitted. Judith replied, tears streaming down her face, we can't keep making excuses. Addiction is an illness, even though we chose to act that way. Every single day, we wish we could undo those choices. Lawrence stared directly into his daughter's eyes. We're determined to never repeat the same mistake. We intend to prove that through our deeds. Melissa let out a long, slow breath. It might take quite some time for me to completely forgive you. However, I'm hoping to take things one step at a time as a family and move ahead. A year had gone by, and Melissa's family was slowly progressing on their healing journey. Lawrence and Judith had conquered their gambling addictions, and they were volunteering at the local senior center, giving support to elderly people dealing with addiction. In an effort to make up for the pain they'd caused Michael, they set up a new education fund for him, putting aside a small amount every month. Melissa herself had turned into a key person in the addiction family support group, using her own experiences to help other families dealing with similar issues. Even though she hadn't completely forgiven her parents, she was slowly starting to trust them again. Michael and his sister, Emma, were growing up without any health issues, and their relationship with their grandparents was slowly starting to heal. Occasionally on weekends, they'd have dinner together at her parents' new place. That particular day, seeing Michael near the pig pen had represented the family's struggle. However, currently, it now acted as a reminder of the hardships we had all gotten through, which had also formed the basis for building a more solid family connection. Melissa gets it now. The road to mending a family is never a straight shot. It involves dealing with relapses mixed with moving forward. What matters most is finding the strength to admit past errors, confront those issues with responsibility, and slowly work towards a better future together. During a summer afternoon, we were at a picnic in the park, watching Michael play and Emma frolic on the lawn, and Melissa posed a question. She asked Lawrence, "How did you manage to bounce back from that horrible day?" Lawrence replied as he looked at his grandkids, "When I nearly lost Michael, I finally woke up and understood the damage I was causing. Addiction doesn't just ruin the addict. It also causes pain to the people you care about most. That was the most difficult thing to deal with." Melissa gave a silent nod. The scars were still there, but she had learned to live alongside them. And above all, she felt she had gained a lot of wisdom from this upsetting experience and had become a more resilient person. A family isn't perfect, but its members can evolve, learn, and occasionally cause each other pain, yet find their way back to each other through love and forgiveness.